Welcome to MTG Friends. We're going to do a Commander deck tech on Gaddock Teeg. This is a great 2-drop in Selesnya green-white. It's a legendary Kithkin advisor with non-creature spells with converted mana cost 4 or greater can't be played, which is of note because most board wipes are going to be 4 or greater. Non-creature spells with X in their mana costs can't be played. So in this build, we got a lot of synergies with some weenies, some keeping them tapped mechanics, and just that protection piece and control piece in this, levering the crap out of Gaddock Teeg. So let's look at the different categories we got. We got a bit of removal, not a ton, a huge laundry list of control. We got the land base, which is pretty straightforward. A couple shenanigan pieces, not too much shenanigans going on. A few protection pieces, handful of draw, and just the staple tutors that you would expect that lever correctly with Gaddock. So we got Gaddock Teeg. We know what he's doing. We're going to be doing a lot of control. So let's just quickly get through some of the removal pieces and get to the meat of what's up. What's up with this? All right, as usual, hit that subscribe, hit the like button if you're new. It is helpful. All right, so removal, we got aura shards. Oh, and it is of note, we're running very creature heavy in this because it lends itself to the commander. So, all right, aura shards, whenever a creature comes into play under your control, because we're playing lots of them, you may destroy target artifact or enchantment. Next up, we got Kataki War's Wage. All artifacts have, at the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice this artifact unless you pay 1. So, also of note, we're running very few artifacts, but we do have a couple, so be careful if and when you play Kataki. Yeah, I think I got that right. Because it will blow up a couple of our pieces. But for the most part, even in our mana ramp, we're not running signets, we're not running talismans, we're not running mana rocks, we're running mana dorks, which we'll get to in a moment. Retribution of the Meek. Bury all creatures with power 4 or greater. Scavenging Ooze. This is to hate on anybody playing out of their graveyard. Very good utility creature, which we can also fetch up in a pinch with a couple of our tutors, or at least one that I can think of that we'll get to. Slaughter the Strong. Each player chooses any number of creatures they control with total power 4 or less. Then sacrifice all other creatures they control. We are running just a couple creatures that do hit that power 4 or greater. So also just keep that in mind. But it is a nice reset button that would not whack our commander. All right, we're into protection. Giver of Runes. Another target creature you control gains protection from colorless or from the color of your choice until end of turn. We want to keep Teague out there. We want to keep him safe. It's worth noting that there is a pretty robust maybe board here for swaps. There are a couple pieces in there that I'll go through at the very end of this video, mainly to just mention some of the ones I was on the fence about and see if you want to swap them in or out. Grand Abolisher. During your turn, your opponents can't cast spells or activate abilities of artifact creatures or enchantments. Very nice staple in white. Heroic Intervention. Give everything indestructible and hexproof till end of turn. Mother of Runes. Another one where you can tap to give one of your creatures protection from a color of your choice. Notice this one is color. It doesn't actually mention the colors. So you have two that are slightly different iterations. If you notice this one, it also gives protection from colorless. All right, moving on to the Break of Dawn. What? Shalia, Voice of Plenty. Flying, your planeswalkers you control and other creatures you control have hexproof. That is nice to keep our board state nice and clean. And for 6, put a 1/1 counter on each creature you control. So that one will come into play. You got to be careful whether you lever that mechanic or not, because we do have a couple things in here like Meekstone that are gonna start shutting down not only our opponent but ourselves, depending on how you play the board. Sigarda, Host of Herons. Herons? Herons. Yeah, something like that. Flying, hexproof, spells and abilities your opponent control can't cause you to sacrifice permanents. So we're just starting to really protect the board, and we can fetch up some of these utility creatures if needed. And Teferi's Protection, make everything protected, including yourself. You know, I have put this in many, many white decks. This one just phases out all your permanents, and nothing can come after you until your next untap step. All right, we're into draw, y'all. Draw. Alms Collector. Flash. If an opponent would draw 2 or more cards, instead you and that player each draw a card. Pretty good one. This one, you play a creature, draw a card. Esper Sentinel. Whenever an opponent casts their first non-creature spell each turn, draw a card unless that player pays X, where X is Esper Sentinel's power. And of course, this has nothing to do with our commander. That X in that Esper Sentinel does not affect us with the commander. All right, next up, Mangara the Diplomat for 4. Lifelink. Whenever an opponent attacks with creatures, if 2 or more of those creatures are attacking, you draw a card. What? And if they cast a second spell, you draw a card. Just very, very good draw mechanics on that one. And it's a 2/4, which is nice. Mentor of the Meek. It is if you play a creature with power 2 or less, you can pay 1 and draw a card. So we got some good synergies going on in terms of draw. Sylvan Library, of course, one of the very few non-creature spells we got in the build. We do have a few, but not a ton. Goes without saying, hey, when you can draw 3 instead of 1, mind you, it will cost you 8 life to do it. It's a good thing. It's a good thing, y'all. Toski, Bearer of Secrets. I'm seeing this pop up all over the place in all sorts of commander decks just because it's that good. Can't be countered, indestructible, and it attacks each turn. Whenever a creature, and that means any of them, you control deals combat damage, draw a card. All right, we are into ramp, folks. All the staples you'd expect. Avacyn Pilgrim, Mana Dork in white. Birds, Mana Dork. Elvish Mystic for green. Finhorde Elves for green. Knights of the Wild Orchid. If you drop this bad boy and an opponent controls more lands than you, you get to fetch up a Plains card. Put it onto the battlefield. Land War Elves. Secure to crack and go grab a basic land. Smothering Tide. Ramp so that we can start getting tokens every time they draw a card. Same thing. Gonna pay 2. Gonna pay 2. What? Gonna pay 2. Sylvan Caryatid. I think I said that right. Caryatid. Defender Hexproof. Specifically out there to go tap for mana. And we're using a lot more mana dorks than normal because we are purposefully not running ramp, mana, rocks. Wow, almost didn't come out of my brain, but you got it. You got it. Whew. Whoa. And you'll see why with some of the hate pieces we got going on. All right, control. Speaking of some hate pieces, not necessarily this one specifically. Angel of Jubilation. It's a 3/3. Other non-black creatures you control get +1. So, again, be careful when and if you play this one. If and when. Players can't pay life or sacrifice creatures to cast spells or activate abilities. That is great hate. Great hate. Archon of Emeria. This also affects us. Each player can't cast more than 1 spell each turn. Not a problem for us because our mana curve is pretty low. Non-basic lands your opponents control enter the battlefield tap. Even better. Even better. All right, even. That's just for those people trying to tutor. They can only tutor the top 4 cards. All right, here's one of the pieces that were the reason why we're not running mana rocks. Activated abilities of artifacts can't be activated. Boom, shalaka-laka. Collector Ufe. This really shuts down your opponents, and most are running a good amount of artifact shenanigans. Containment Priest. If a non-token creature would enter the battlefield and it wasn't cast, exile it instead. Yes. Yes. In my playgroups, this is super jankalicious fun. If you're running into playgroups where this just really isn't that much of a factor, swap it out. Swap it out. But for me, definitely a great piece. Destiny Spinner Creature and enchantment spells you control can't be countered. That's nice for that blue shenanigans your opponents might have. And for 4, just sort of an added bonus. Target lands you control become an XX elemental creature with trample and haste until end of turn. Yeah. Loving it. All right, Dozen the Falling Leaf. Players can play spells only during their own turns. Yes, we want to play the way we want to play in this deck, not the way others want to play. Oh, hardcore hate piece. Dranith Magistrate. You drop this thing and they can't play their commander out of the command zone. Lovely, love it. Your opponents can't cast spells from anywhere other than their hands. And if you got Teague out, then they can't do most of the board wipes available to them. Boom, boom, shake the broom. Eidolon of Rhetoric for 3. Each player can't cast more than 1 spell each turn. We're going to slow down the board and just keep win conning that, just hitting them with 2s and 3s and going wide and keeping them from playing big creatures. I mean, that is just fun, right? Fun. Each player who has cast a non-artifact spell this turn can't cast an additional non-artifact spell. Just locks it down even more, yo. Ghostly Prison keeps them from attacking you unless they pay 2 for each creature. They go ultra wide on you. Gotta slow that shizzizle down, y'all. Gotta slow it down. Glow Rider. We're gonna really hate on people wanting to play non-creature spells. Non-creature spells cost 1 more to play. Throne of Eldraine's Hushbringer. Creatures entering the battlefield or dying don't cause abilities to trigger. We do not have very many enters the battlefield mechanics in this build. Just keep an eye out. In fact, do we have any? I think there's very few. Not too many. All right, creatures entering the battlefield don't cause abilities to trigger. And it's got flash. Boom. Yeah. I've said boom a lot in this episode. Players can't search libraries. Any player may pay 2 for that player to ignore the effect. Just Arbiter is a nice little shutdown piece. Speaking of shutdown pieces, this one is so fabuloso. Linvala, Keeper of Silence. I think this has been printed more than once. Yes, I thought so. Activated abilities of creatures your opponents control can't be activated. That includes little mana dorks and stuff. I mean, that's fun. Not for you, for me, but not for you. I have no idea what accent that was supposed to be. Loxodon Gatekeeper for 4. 2/3 artifact creatures and lands your opponent's control come into play tapped. We're just making them continue to lose a turn and slow their board down and just make them not happy. And that's what Commander's all about, right? Making your opponents not happy? Well, maybe not. I mean, because you do want to have fun, right? Marble Titan for 4. Creatures with power 3 or greater don't untap during their controller's untap step. So, again, most of our creatures are within that category, but if we start buffing and doing different things with a couple of the pieces that we've mentioned already, this will start coming into effect. Meekstone, same thing. Any creature with power greater than 2 may not be untapped as normal, as in 3 or more. All right, here's one that kind of breaks the mold, breaks the rules of what we're going after, but that's just because it's going to stalemate them until we can go in for the win. You can't lose the game and your opponents can't win the game. You're probably at some point not going to be able to swing in with this because it's a 4/4 and then it won't be untapped and not be able to block for you. But again, it's mainly out there not as a beater, but to just keep you in the game if things have gone awry. Rydane, God of the Worthy, Flying Vigilance. Snowlands your opponent controlling the battlefield tapped. Probably not going to be a factor, although I'm seeing a lot more Snowlands lately. I just have, especially with like stuff like Field of the Dead and that kind of thing. Non-creature spells your opponents cast with converted mana cost 4 or greater can't cost 2 more to cast. So even if Teague has been whack-a-mole, we can get this back on the field and make things cost a couple more to give you the time you need to get your board state stabilized. Now, I waffled, gotta be honest, I waffled back and forth about whether to include this card. And ultimately, I just decided, yes, Yes to Rest in Peace. When Rest in Peace enters the battlefield, exile all cards from all graveyards. So we're hating on graveyard play, which there's, at least as of lately, there's been a lot of graveyard play, especially with the zombie stuff that's been coming out. But, I mean, often you're going to run into people that are just playing out of the graveyards, plain and simple. If a card or token would be put into a graveyard from anywhere, exile it instead. On top of that, if we have any sack mechanics or hits the graveyard shenanigans, this circumvents it and says, no, 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 because it exiles it instead. That shuts down stuff like Giza and all sorts of things. Although Giza exiles as well, which is an interesting thing because if you have more than one player out there with exile instead mechanics, the priority ends up being like who played first and who's next. It gets super confusing. If you have questions about that, put in the comments and I will answer that in depth. Because if you have the exile instead mechanic and you're playing with more than 2 people, it actually depends on priority and all that craziness. Really fun stuff, y'all. All right, Sanctum Prelate. Let's talk about this for a second because you're probably going, okay, yeah. Non-creature spells with a converted mana cost equal to the chosen number can't be cast. So when it hits the board, you choose a number. Now, if Teague is out, that means non-creature spells 4 or greater are already shut down. So you got to decide, am I doing 0, 1, 2, 3? Well, 3 shuts down a handful of things, but 2 in particular will shut down Rift. It'll shut down Cyclonic Rift, and that is probably something you're going to want to do. So when I play Sanctum, depending on the board state, I'm probably going to pick 2. But then if you're playing against somebody playing Feathers, you might want to pick 1. So it just depends. But normally you're going to be picking 2 or 3 because 3 will shut down a good amount of shenanigans as well. Okay. Spell Tithe Enforcer for 5. Whenever an opponent plays a spell, that player sacrifices a permanent unless he or she pays 1. Notice that's opponent. Doesn't have anything to do with you. You get to keep on keeping on, y'all. Very nice control piece for 5. Spirit of the Labyrinth. Each player can't draw more than 1 card each turn. Talia, Garden of Thraben. I just saw a spoiler as of this recording that this is being reprinted with some really cool vampire looking stuff in the set that's coming out soon. And if you're watching this 3 years from now, well then just ignore that whole statement. First strike, non-creature spells, cast 1 more to cast. Cost 1 more to cast. Blah, blah, blah. Alright, Thalia, Heretic Cathar. First strike, creatures and non-basic lands your opponent control enter the battlefield. Are you seeing the theme here? Are you seeing the theme? We're making their stuff come in tapped. We're making things just slow down for your opponent while we can just keep on going. Keep on going, yo. Thorn of Amethyst. As of this recording, this was actually kind of spendy. So if you don't have the card and you don't want to add yet another non-creature spells, cost 1 more to play thing, you can certainly swap this out for something else in the maybe board and something that maybe I haven't thought of. And if there is something in this deck that you were like, whoa, man, you forgot the so-and-so card. Well, totally tell me, man. Totally tell me. All right, Torpor Orb for 2. Creatures entering the battlefield don't cause abilities to trigger. Again, be real careful. We just have a couple that do trigger. But most likely this is only going to affect your opponents. All right, the Wingmare. Non-creature spells cost 1 more to cast. Windborn Muse. Creatures can't attack you. So a Ghostly Prison in the form of a 2/3. Boom, boom. All right. Oh, I toiled and toiled and toiled whether to put this in. And ultimately, it won a spot in the 99 because our curve is very, very low. And if we need to shut down everybody else, this is a great, great piece. So let's assume that everybody's tapped most of their mana and there might be a couple up. Well, this one shuts down and slows things down that it doesn't slow it down for us. A player may not untap more than 1 land during the untap phase of each of his or her turns. And we are running the other Muse, which we'll get to in a second, which actually circumvents this for us specifically. Winter Orb is really going to shut down people that are trying to lever a big mana base. Loving it, loving it. Yasharn, Implacable Earth, lets us fetch up a couple lands, and most importantly, players can't pay life or sacrifice non-land permanents to cast spells or activate abilities. Shuts down all that, including fetch lands. So players can't pay life, which that's what a fetch land is. So they play a fetch land, and if this thing is in there, nope. You got a dead land, y'all. Dead land that can't do nothing. All right, Manifold Promenade. This is the if you have more than 2 opponents, you can get your colors. Oh, we are in land. Branch Loft, we're going to blast through this. This is either one, white or green, when it hits the battlefield. Command Tower, of course. Good amount of force. Gavany Township. For 4, we can put 1/1 counters on each creature you control. And that's very important whether or not you lever that with the Meekstone and the other mechanics. Core Haven, you can tap for 2, prevent all combat damage that would be dealt by target attacking creature this turn. When we're making an assumption here that there's a very good probability that you got things locked down where they're not attacking with very many creatures. Overgrown Farmland, this is the new one at a Midnight Hunt. If you got 2 or more lands, comes in untapped. 11 Plains, Reliquary Tower, because we do have some mechanics that are going to start drawing us a good amount of cards. Shock land in our colors. All right, Shenanigans. This is one of our, dare I say, alt-win cards, because it doesn't necessarily win you the game, but it's definitely going to get you on the way. And it's one of very few shenanigan pieces we got. And it's got Vigilance. So if you got Meekstone out, this thing's just going to keep hitting. Other creatures you control get +2/+2. And creatures opponents control get -2/-2. Yeah, buddy. All right, Seedborn Muse is specifically in here for things that keep our shizzizle tapped. Seedborn Muse, untap all permanents you control during each other player's untap step. Specifically in there just for that. All right, we got just a few tutor pieces in here. Search your library for a creature card, reveal that card, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library for our utility creatures we may need during the game. Lighten Tutor to go grab a couple things that we might need, like Ghostly Prison, etc., etc., etc. Do it at the end step of your opponent, and then you got exactly what you need, yo. Exactly what you need. All right, this tutors up a creature toughness 2 or less. You put it into your hand. Shuffle your library. Worldly Tutor. We all know what this does, right? It's the other tutor I like from Mirage. I like all the tutors from Mirage, actually. You grab a creature, put it on top of your library at instant speed. Instant speed, y'all. And that brings us back to the Commander. This is such a spicy deck that I'm actually gonna put this together in paper and run it, and I'll let you know how it goes. I'm pretty sure it's gonna go pretty good, and then if I do any little tweaks, I will put them in the description, or maybe do a follow-up. Now, normally this would be when I say adios muchachos, but there are a couple pieces in the maybe board that almost made the cut and you might end up considering putting in. I wanted to talk about a couple of them to note. One of them is actually Privileged Position. Ultimately, it didn't make the cut because it costs 5, and that, assuming we have Teague out, means that this is a dead card in our hand. And if we have Teague out, that means that most likely there are not going to be any board wipes happening unless they have some sack mechanics, etc., to make us get rid of Teague. So this didn't make the cut. But if Teague was not on there, this is a great piece to put out. Other permanents you control can't be the target of spells or abilities your opponents control. I was so on the fence about it that I decided to include this in the possibilities that you may decide to swap in. But I just felt like in terms of how you ramp up and how the board state will progress, most likely Teague will be out when you want to try to play this, and then you won't be able to. The other one of note is I decided not to put in Heliod Sun Crown because this really isn't a life gain deck. And because Teague doesn't let you play creatures with X in it, you cannot put the Walking Ballista Heliod combo in here if you are going without circumventing the whole point of what Teague does. I think for the most part, the rest of these make sense. Tithe Taker almost made the cut, except it just wasn't as strong as some of the others. And Silence, I decided there's enough going on here where we don't need to worry about opponents casting additional spells on their turn, or on any turn for that matter. So other than that, I think we've got some pretty solid stuff. If there are certain cards that you were like, oh my god, he didn't think of such and such card, please put it in the comments. This one is not in its final version, but it's pretty darn close. I think it's going to be lots of fun to play. Let me know how it plays if you put this one together. All right, thanks for checking us out. Check out the other episodes. Peace, y'all.